All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Maddie Hornsby. I'm the project manager for the Riot organization. Welcome to the Riot Lunch and Learn series, the place where we spotlight Riot sponsors. Today, we have with us Michelle Grimes-Harding from CalChip to speak about the expansion of Private Lte/CBRS. Just a couple quick reminders before we get started. This event is being recorded and will be posted to Riot's YouTube channel and uploaded to the meetup page where you registered for this event. If you have any questions, please place those throughout the chat and we will be monitoring those and answer those at the end of the presentation. And then please keep yourself muted throughout the entire event. With all that being said, I will pass it over to Michelle. Michelle, thanks for joining us today.
Maddie, thank you so much for having us. So hello, everyone. I am very honored to be your presenter today, which is the last Lunch and Learn session that we will be having for 2021. So our goal in our presentation today is to talk about the expansion of Private Lte and CBRS. But of course, we want to make sure that our last session of the year is an interactive and a memorable one. So we want to ask everyone to participate in a short poll that we have available. So I'm asking all of you to follow the instructions that you see on the screen before you. Please log into Kahoot.it and enter the code 5816834. Again, 5816834. And momentarily, what I will do is we will look at the Kahoot screen. We will look at the poll questions together, and I'll walk you through that process of answering. So we'll give everyone a moment to log into Kahoot.it, and again, using code 5816834. So let's make this interactive and fun today. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take a look at our Kahoot, if you will, and we're going to log in there. Thank you so very much for those who are logging into the Kahoot. All right, and we're going to show everyone's participation here. We're going to go ahead and just give it just a few more seconds. So some of you last minute attendees, if you want to log in again to Kahoot, Kahoot.it, and use the pin 5816834. We're interested in getting some of your feedback and interaction during this lunch and learn. All right, we're going to go ahead and start the Kahoot. So what this Kahoot is going to do is it will allow us to have a poll question. So we have a couple of poll questions, and you will see on your screen a series of different shapes, and the shapes are going to correspond with the answers, which you can choose multiple selections on your screen. So the question is, what would you like to learn about Private Lte or CBRS? So if you are selecting a triangle, you're basically like, hey, what is it? If you select the circle, you want to know how Private Lte CBRS compares to Wi-Fi. If you select the diamond, you would like to know, how does this apply? This solution applies to different industries. And if you have a square, you're just interested in, hey, how do I get started? I know a little bit about it, but I just, want to know, how do I purchase it? How do I select the device? And we'll get a chance to answer all of those things for you today. All right, you have 34 seconds to make a selection. Hopefully we'll have more than 5 answers here. All right, for the other participants, you have 19 seconds to make a selection. And we're just going to do this one question before we get started. All right, so we have 7 seconds remaining. Thank you for that last minute selection. All right, and we're going to go and see. So most of you have answered, how does someone get started, which is great, because that basically shows me that a few of you have a base knowledge of what private LTE really is. We have 33% of you who are asking, hey, what is it? Which is great, because today you're going to get that foundational background about what these particular solutions are. Some of you are wondering, how does it compare to Wi-Fi? And then another 33% of you are wanting to know, how does this apply to different industries? So let's go ahead and get started into our presentation. And for those of you who do not know who I am, my name is Michelle Grimes Harding. I am the Director of Strategic Accounts with CalChip Connect. And again, I am very honored to be your presenter today as we discuss the expansion of private LTE as well as CBRS. And in my opinion, we are pretty much looking at a technological revolution as we speak. So our agenda and our talk track today, of course, the introduction as I am giving to you at this very moment, but we will explain what private LTE and CBRS is. We'll also discuss, why is this not considered a game changer? And then we'll have open discussion and a question and answer period. Now, for those of you that do have questions along the way, you will be able to submit those questions in the chat box, and we will check those periodically. Now, Maddie will stop myself as well as my co-presenter, who I'm going to introduce to you momentarily, in the event that there is a burning question regarding the topic that we are discussing at that particular moment. And then, of course, we'll close it out with hopefully some follow-up steps for all of you. So we're interested in getting started. So again, as I mentioned a few moments ago, that I believe that these particular solutions are revolutionary for a number of reasons. For one, there's an increased number as far as the type of devices that are connecting to IoT or utilizing IoT, if you will. And, we're looking at, more or less from my background, for those of you who are curious, I spent 17 years with one of the largest wireless carriers in the United States. And I have seen the evolution of wireless devices as well as how we look at telecommunications in the industry altogether. I remember selling one of the very first camera phones that came out. It was like an LG VX6000, I believe is what the model number was. And when we were selling text messaging packages for $1.99, and that was 100 in the package, which included sending and receiving, which most of us during the time of this presentation will probably send and receive a number of 100 text messages. So the thing about it is we've now gone from just a typical using a mobile device to communicate with, to where now we have our refrigerators, we have our vehicles, we have different mechanisms that can connect to the internet. And as a result, it can provide us with measurements of some sort. And as a result of that, we're also able to look at things from a quality control application. And we look at how the different levels of data have generated different levels of reporting, and it's enabling us to be able to move our business in a different direction. So with that, I want to introduce my Vice President of Sales here at CalChip Connect, Brian Balowski, and I am very happy to share this time with him, but he's actually going to discuss with us what is private LTE and CBRS. So we want to kind of dive in and understand. So Brian is here on the screen, and I'm going to introduce him to all of you here. And at this particular point in time, Brian is going to discuss what is private LTE and CBRS. So Brian, are they the same thing? Is private LTE and CBRS the same?
Well, thanks for asking, Michelle. They're actually not entirely the same. Kind of like square rectangle. Good to meet you all. Brian Balowski, VP of Sales here at CalChip Connect. I don't see myself. So Maddie, can you give me a thumbs up? And am I like in frame here? Good. Okay, fantastic. My head's not cut off or something. All right, good. All right, awesome. So yeah, a good foundational question to start with is, what is the difference between Private Lte and CBRS? And forgive me for those of you in the room who know the difference, but just to cover off for those who don't, because these terms very much, at least here in the US, have become interchangeable over the past couple of years. And I want to just create the distinction for you. So Private LTE has been around as long as LTE has been around. So pretty much since 2009, when 4G LTE launched and brought with it innovations like Uber and things that weren't really possible before LTE came along. Large organizations, municipalities, various countries looked at, okay, well, what if I don't want to use a carrier network and I want to use a private cellular network? And so Private LTE was born at the same time, where customers, enterprises, whoever that entity is, would deploy their own cellular network. And the way that that was done was either using unlicensed spectrum, which got very crowded. I think that's my next slide here. Thank you. Either using unlicensed spectrum, which quickly got very crowded, or more commonly using licensed spectrum. So they actually had to bid on licensed spectrum, which was obviously very expensive. So several years ago, I don't know the exact date, but as cellular technology moved into higher frequencies in the spectrum, the FCC was looking at, hey, we've got this big chunk of spectrum that is kind of not really being used, but it's set aside for some very important people like the Navy using their radar systems. So we can't give this spectrum away, but gosh, there's a whole lot of it. I mean, 1.5 gigs of underutilized spectrum. So some companies got together and started talking about, well, what if we share this? And by the way, the name of that spectrum, this 3.55 to 3.7 gigahertz, it was called the CBRS band, Citizens Broadband Radio Service. So CBRS was actually just the name for this slice of spectrum that the FCC, together with some entities, looked at and said, hey, we could share this because the incumbents there, the Navy and some other incumbents throughout the country, are barely using it, definitely not using it to its potential. And so that was the birth of the idea of sharing spectrum in a way that could be privatized. So again, CBRS, the name of the spectrum, Private Lte, just the description given in general to an organization that's going to set up a cellular network just for its own use. So, and we'll touch a bit on what ONGO is and how that relates, probably a little bit later. So CBRS is a spectrum, and the FCC came up with this way to dynamically share it that protects the incumbent by giving them primary access to the spectrum. If the Navy needs to use it for the radars, they get to use it. But if they're not using it, then there's spectrum available for anyone to use. So it's not unlicensed spectrum that just anyone can use, because you actually need to register with what's called a SAS, a spectrum allocation system, in order to gain access to that spectrum. And those SAS systems can actually dynamically assign channels to people who are using the spectrum in order to protect the incumbents that are using it. And instead of just a two-tier system, incumbents and everyone else, there was kind of a middle layer added there, which is called a commonly referred to as a PAL license, or a priority access license. And those are companies that have actually purchased a portion of the spectrum. And I shouldn't say companies, whatever, could be, could be a company, could be a school district, et cetera. But they've actually purchased a piece of that spectrum, which is everyone else who's, they're paying just a little bit to the SAS so that they can use the spectrum. Very little bit. I mean, they're not buying the spectrum. They're just paying for a little bit of access. But yeah, priority access licenses, PALs will get prioritized, and then obviously incumbents get top priority. And the system is constantly listening to who's on the SAS system and actually reallocating channels. And right, it is entirely possible that if there are incumbents using it and there are PAL license users using it, that the service for the general authorized access would be, the bandwidth that they're given would be severely limited. Some other nuances in there I don't think super important to cover unless people want to get deep in the weeds technically. So did that answer the question, Michelle, as far as the difference between CBRS and Private Lte? Oh, obviously, CBRS is just in the US. Private Lte is being done globally. And now other countries are looking at the success of the US model and saying, hey, we have spectrum that we could do in this sharing, in this shared manner. And so other countries are following suit with what the US has pioneered with this shared spectrum system.
Well, great. I think that explains the difference between the two perfectly, honestly. And so, Russ, you actually left some information in the chat. So you actually are saying first option is to switch user to another spectrum, not disrupt. Private is different than shared greatly.
No, thanks, Russ. This is great point. Great point. Because yeah, if you are on an entirely private LTE network, obviously there is no interruption. If you own that, you own that.
No, there's a really big difference. Private, like countries like Germany with the regulator BNetzA have set aside private spectrum that companies can buy or lease by the year 10 megahertz chunks up to 4 consecutive and some even greater. But there's 100 megahertz of bandwidth and they basically own that. And it's about 1,200 euros a year, which is relatively inexpensive. And they can deploy their own network versus CBRS, which you do have that ability to be interrupted. And it's a challenge for industrials to deploy CBRS just from that aspect, because downtime is not something they can afford. CBRS fits a lot of other use cases, and it can fit factories as well. It's just, if you're trying to get high availability, reliability, and can't afford to be down, and you're anywhere near where the Navy operates, you could have a challenge. And the Navy could do it. By the way, the reallocations are predetermined the night before and shared amongst the SAS vendors. There's 6 or 5 SAS vendors in the US. And there's a new option there's a couple new options that are being considered for CBRS that could expand it, which include increased power, multiple filings to the FCC. And then the second one would be informed incumbent consent, which means the Navy would inform the SAS vendors in advance and you would get much more predictability on interruptions.
Thanks, Russ. Super appreciate that insight. And yeah, didn't want to get too deep in the weeds on this call, but super appreciate that. Thanks for chiming in. I think going forward, let's keep people on mute just until we get through, and then we're gonna have a discussion portion at the end here. But yeah, I appreciate you chiming in just to clear up any confusion that I might have created.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Russ. So at this particular point in time, we also want to just discuss some of the major market drivers for LTE based on the private network. So for instance, some of the top industries that really take advantage of this solution, industrial usually takes up 32% of what you will see. So manufacturing, transportation, utilities, energy industries primarily have been one of the top users of using private networks. And the government, as Russ was able to provide some information for us regarding that, would be another industry as far as being a market driver as far as usage is concerned. Hospitality for entertainment, healthcare, and I believe healthcare is growing by leaps and bounds. obviously by the events that have taken place over the last few months, where the need for healthcare, particularly in remote areas, is growing greatly. And then to round out the top four, we would say more or less retail and office spaces. So you can see from the chart that we have illustrated on the screen, pretty much how it's dissecting. Now, these can change pretty much at any moment, depending upon different situational variables. In education has really grown in this particular space, particularly based on the events of the pandemic, and making sure that this particular technology is readily available for individuals who may not have Wi-Fi access in their homes.
Yeah, I would actually say, yeah, this slide might actually be a little outdated, kind of, mid post-pandemic, when the education space saw this as an opportunity to bring connectivity to students who had previously not been connected in their homes. So we saw an unusually large amount of CBRS deployments in school districts and on campuses, but mostly in the actual districts to bring connectivity to home. So yeah, they're obviously worldwide or kind of geopolitical driving factors that can alter this chart at any moment.
Yes, indeed. So great insight and great questions there. So Brian, do you mind providing some greater insight about protected zones, as well as kind of the grandfathered licenses and how they expired and how that has impacted Private Lte?
Sure, yeah, and just, we're not gonna spend a lot of time, but yeah, just as Russ had mentioned, there are, especially coastal, you can see, those are the Navy ports, where those zones are very regulated as far as deploying CBRS networks. There are other things sprinkled throughout the country. There were a bunch of companies doing fixed wireless access that were using the spectrum, but they were actually kind of their licenses were set to expire. It got extended because of the pandemic, but I think at this point they've expired and they had to move on to other spectrum or switch to using the CBRS spectrum to provide their FWA services.
Good stuff.
And
So, and you also mentioned PAL is also being kind of in that middle band of the triangle. Sorry, kind of being in the middle band of the triangle. So there was a huge auction that took place that has been a game changer for certain industries as well as for certain companies and organizations. So can we kind of talk a little bit about that too?
Sure. And huge is a relative term. Huge compared to what people thought would happen in regards to the CBRS spectrum. I think a single auction for a licensed spectrum, could garner 10x this amount. But since this was a new technology and kind of a new technology theory, it was really great to see the diversity and the turnout for the auction. Everything from school districts to Fortune 100 companies to the carriers trying to snatch up more spectrum for their services. But yeah, PALs went to a wide variety of folks. There were some players who snatched up a lot of PAL licenses because the CBRS spectrum was actually a core part of their strategy. So you could see, obviously, Verizon focusing on some of those major metropolitan areas, Dish kind of targeting the rest of the country, and then you've got pockets of enterprises like Chevron with their oil fields snatching up spectrum, exactly where it's useful to them.
Absolutely. So overall, people kind of talk about, well, I'm still not quite sure how this would impact me and how, this whole thing really works. So when people say end-to-end cellular CBRS network, exactly what does that mean? How can we simplify it?
Well, I like this slide because it kind of, I think, captures the stack. And just like any other wireless technology, there are different companies that specialize in different portions of the stack. So on the left side, right, you've got your devices, and this could be consumer devices, tablets, phones. This could also be industrial devices, security cameras, or point of sale terminals in a retail setting. They're talking to the RAN. Another term for that is CBSD. Two categories there, we don't have to get into that. But anyway, so they're talking to the cell tower, basically. And Cbrs deploys a lot more like a Wi-Fi access system than it does an actual cell tower. You could put, you see a picture there of an access point up on the top of the pole. So in general, it's easier to stand up. Anyway, that the RAN is then talking to a core, which could be on in the cloud, could be on a premises. It's called the Evolved Packet Core, abbreviated EPC, and that's really the brains of the operation, no different than cellular architectures today. And then sending that data to wherever the endpoint is. What's different though, and this is where Cbrs departs from cellular, is you've got that spectrum allocation service in there. Like Russ said, determining the night before who's going to be assigned what the following day. The SAS systems are accessing the FCC database where any users of the spectrum are registered, and then that's communicating to the ESC network. Is those are in the coastal areas where there's like Navy activity, that network is listening for the incumbents, constantly listening for the incumbents and communicating back to the SAS, hey, a incumbent is coming close, we need to reallocate the spectrum.
Good stuff. I mean, I think that really sums up what the main differences are between Private LTE and CBRS. So it's time for us to take another quick poll question. So log back into Kahoots, if you will, and we're going to ask a second poll question of our participants. And that second poll question will appear on your screen here momentarily. And let's take a look. So we have the results from the very first poll question. So that second question is, give me 1 second here. And we're going to start it. So that second question is based on more or less what you feel is been presented. Do you consider this to be a game changer? Do you consider this to be a game changer in either your industry or let's say within your organization? Do you think that this is something that is considered a game changer? So we're having a little technical difficulty with the Kahoot, but no worries. And for those of you that do consider this to be a game changer, we'll discuss here at the end, why do you consider it to be a game changer?
Do they need to, is this a new PIN?
Actually,
People need to,
it is a new PIN. So you know what, let me share that. If you all please, Kahoot. Oh, someone said cool, thank you. Go to Kahoot, KAHOOT.IT for those of you who are newer additions to our discussion. So again, go to www.kahoots.it. And then it's going to ask you to enter a game PIN. So enter 5694911. We would love to get everyone's input here. And this will be a quick one. All right, so we'll give it just another couple of seconds here. Again, Kahoot, KAHOOT.IT. Enter in the game PIN 5694911. We're going to go ahead and get started with that question, which is, again, do you believe that the Private LTE CBRS is a game changer? And again, for those who are not familiar with how to play along in Kahoot, we have options here. So on your screen, on your personal device, you will see either a triangle. The triangle means yes. If you see a circle, means maybe, tell me more. Or you'll see the diamond, which means no, I don't think that it's a game changer. So if you would please answer, you have 9 seconds left. 8, 7, 6. All right. So we have basically 50% of you say no, you don't believe it's I'm sorry, you have 40% that says yes, this is indeed a game changer. And we have the other 40% that says maybe, tell me more, which is exactly what we wanted. And then we have 20% of you said that, have said no. So we'll discuss a little later for those who don't believe that it is indeed a game changer. But, we'll take a moment here before we talk about the benefits of Private Lte, CBRS, and, just talk about, how this is an opportunity for all of us to kind of learn more about it. So as I mentioned earlier, I came from a traditional wireless background. And so as I switched, kind of industries and career paths, if you will, I found myself immersed in this education of learning about Private Lte as well as CBRS, and how I personally believe that it is indeed a game changer. So we want to talk about some of the benefits of it, and how when we position this to our potential clients, as well as for those of you who have different businesses and organizations, and you want to know how this can transform the way business is done today, we can kind of discuss a little bit of that. So for one, the major benefit of this is removing the wire. Obviously, wireless is indeed the way to go. So as a result of that, it is helped with saving significantly on some capital expenses, if you will. It also provides a certain level of mobility and flexibility instead of utilizing fixed wireless access, if you will. And then you're also connecting underserved assets. So
Can I just chime in here real quick?
absolutely.
Just a quick anecdotal story on that, as far as removing the wire. There was a really well-known early on CBRS deployment at kind of this, entertainment park, mall type space. And they were looking at connecting digital signs around, I think someone's up. Oh, thank you. They were looking at connecting digital signs throughout the parking lot and kind of surrounding property. They had gotten a quote to trench cable out to all these digital signs to connect them. And then that came out to, my numbers might get a little fuzzier, but it was somewhere in the ballpark of $4 million. And then they were able to do the entire, connect all those digital signage assets to the tune of $400,000. So we were looking at a 10% totally capital expense in order to connect every one of these, however many dozens or hundreds of digital signs that are connected.
Absolutely. So, just making that upfront investment is definitely a game changer, particularly when you're looking at organizations who are looking, long-term and not just necessarily in the short term. So what that does give way to is improved performance, which of course is another benefit. You will now, in having, Private Lte, secured, predictable, reliable coverage as well as capacity, enhanced mobility and range. And then the wonderful thing about having a Private Lte CBRS is, we then have the ability to have it upgraded to 5G, once that technology is indeed available. So, at that point, we can then talk about how this can be scaled at an enterprise level, just as Brian just gave us an example of being able to just use simple access to spectrum, and to pretty much have this open ecosystem to different standards. And then of course, with Private Lte, you can customize it specifically to what it is that you need for your business. So it's not a one size fits all solution like you find with traditional wireless organizations. These things can be customized very much so for what it is that you need. So, we really look at this level of technology as a disruption, if you will, and an enhancement. Some people don't necessarily like the term disruption, but I prefer to use it as an enhancement, if you will, to, having mission critical, ultra reliable, low latency connectivity. And, as we kind of talk about this edge of technology and how all of these various devices will be connecting to the world of the internet. I mean, it's so very important to make sure that there's some levels of control as far as the automation is concerned, being able to have cross integration. But more than anything, look at this as an investment into technology, as well as into just the future of your personal organization, as well as the organizations you may be positioning these solutions to. So Brian, I want to ask for your expertise once again, because I know you are very familiar with this slide, and we talk about the enterprise cellular go-to market. So, basically here are a number of organizations who have either, provide these services or have the type of devices that you could use. They have the systems that can integrate.
Yeah. So what we wanted to capture here was just the I'd say the breadth of the ecosystem. And just like a wireless technology alliance like LoRaWAN, CBRS has kind of emerged with a similar ecosystem supporting it, where you've got companies that specialize in each portion of the stack. Now, typical deployments will either be a combination of each part of the stack from a different vendor, or some vendors do, 1, 2, or 3 portions, or there are other vendors that just do the whole stack from end node, to base stations all the way up to cloud platform. Someone like Nokia is a great example of that has the full thing. Along with working with someone like Nokia, there's a price tag attached to that, but it's one company and kind of a simpler deployment model. So enterprises that have the expertise and the time to really dig into it with disparate vendors and then bring that all together into a customized solution, that's being done too. But yeah, I just really wanted to show that there are a lot of players in the space. The one category here that's very controlled, though, is the SaaS vendor category. Companies have to apply, in order to become a SaaS vendor, and quite frankly, I'm not sure if any more companies will enter that space, because I don't, in my opinion, it's not a huge moneymaker. It's just an essential piece of the pie in order to handle the spectrum allocation.
Good to know. And, I think, more or less kind of a plug for us at CalChip Connect. We actually have an entire sales team that is able to partner with each and every one of you who may have, customers who are interested in learning more about this and different solutions and some of those solution partners. We actually have a full-fledged pilot program that will, help to onboard, customers who are absolutely, kind of clueless in how they can create an inception and bring it to fruition. We can actually help strategize and carve out, what that would look like, utilizing a number of those different go-to market vendors that were just on the slide. But, more or less in closing, we want to just kind of show a snapshot of the screen here, where we can talk about all of the different ways that private LTE and different applications could be used.
Some of the different ways.
Some of the different ways. By no means is it limited to just what's on this slide. And in fact, as we are talking, new ways are being prevented and are being created and invented as we are having this lunch and learn discussion today. So, I mean, you can use it for workflow integration. You can use it to monitor remote sites, industrial sites, rail yard communication, home learning, as we talked about with the entertainment segment. We talked about with even sports venues, this is becoming a huge platform. Being able to look at assets that are particularly in very remote and rural areas, storage monitoring, take monitoring, things of that sort, and of course, video surveillance. So these are just a few of the aspects. And again, our goal today was just to start a discussion and provide a high-level discussion about the expansion of Private Lte and CBRS. And again, this is something that has been discussed for a very long time by a number of different people, and it is constantly evolving and changing. So let's give a moment to discuss. I see a few of you have left a couple of questions in the chat, so we'll give a moment here to review over there. And so Jessica asked the question, are there any CBRS deployments in North Carolina? And if so, where?
We're not personally involved in any, but I can almost guarantee that there are. I think every state at this point has got, you know, a decent number of deployments, whether they're with enterprises or school districts or elsewhere. So I couldn't name one off the top of my head, but pretty sure there are. If not for enterprise, then possibly for fixed wireless access.
Good stuff.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. So, and Jessica, if you want us to follow up with you, I'll be more than happy to provide some information, learn more about what you're specifically looking for, and we'll definitely be able to provide some guidance from there. We have another question from Ramil. Ramil is asking, is CBRS 5G?
And it is, so there is, yes, there is a 5G, let's call it, version of CBRS. So different, gosh, I almost need, Rich, can you help me out here in CBRS being used? Sorry, we have our solutions engineer in the room.
Yes, so we
I'm
are,
not
yeah.
the technical guy for, you know, I know that Russ is here, so I want to capture this precisely. But yes, you can use 5G over CBRS. It's not band 48, it's N48, you know, new generation 48. But it's it works the same way, and it's, you know, shared allocation. So in fact, a lot of the equipment that's been deployed so far, specifically for LTE CBRS, is upgradable, you know, either through software or hardware additions to 5G. And a lot of the current innovation that's being done in the space is using 5G, protocol in order to handle, you know, higher bandwidth, higher throughput, faster speeds, lower latency. So yeah, I think I got tripped up on the question, is CBRS 5G? No. Does CBRS allow for 5G communication? Yes.
Great question, Ramil. So we also have a question from Karen, and Karen is asking, as a business development and finance coach, I can make recommendations to my manufacturers and mining companies. How can I partner with you for any sales generated by my company? So I want to share our contact information at the very end, Karen, so that is a great question. So yes, we'd love to partner with you. And if not, you know, if you don't have any actual opportunities at the moment, we can educate you guys on who CalChip is and how we can actually assist you in some of those processes. All right, so we have another question here. Can you please also talk about how these LTE products fit into CBRS? So we don't necessarily want to get product specific during this particular call because there's a number of different products that could fit within the CBRS space. So, you know, we, if you want to have a further discussion with us about what specific devices would be ideal for maybe your solution or what it is that you are particularly looking to do, we'll be more than happy to have that discussion with you. All right, let's look for any other questions here. We got some more messages coming through, and let's see. All righty. So someone is actually Eunice. It's actually stating if anyone needs support designing custom connectivity in CBRS, he's actually putting his information out there. So great way to network, Eunice. As you know, lunch and learns are about not only learning, but also effectively networking at the same time. So absolutely, that's great. So we'll open it up and we'll allow everyone an opportunity to unmute themselves and to maybe openly ask questions, or, you know, to just kind of have a discussion period, if you will. We have just a few minutes left in the session, so I definitely want to respect the time that Maddie has provided us today. So does anyone have any questions that they wish to ask?
I feel like I want to get a cup of coffee with Russ.
So Ramil has a question and wants to know if he can cook with 3.5 gigahertz like he can with a microwave.
I think it's too low of a frequency.
Yeah, I wouldn't have anything with any milk or eggs in
You
it.
can
that
put
you're
your
trying to-
toast on top of a CBSD, and it might heat up enough to fly. Pablo, what's
This is
up?
it's a critical topic. We need to grab coffee, but it's a critical topic on safety. Everybody, you know, there's a lot of people that burned down towers in Europe saying that COVID and everything else was caused by 5G, specifically CBRS. But, you know, there are very tight rules and regulations around power emissions. And in fact, 5G with massive MIMO is much more efficient on delivering power at a specific point in space and time.
Mhm.
So it's much safer, but nobody really has 20-year data because, you know, it's new. So, you know, we'll all see if we have 3 years and 20 years.
Oh, there you go, Russ. Good point to make. Pablo, I know you have unmuted yourself and you wanted to make a statement.
Yeah, actually join the discussion. So I would like to ask to everybody in terms of either on-premise to so if everybody wants to have their networks like hosted by themselves, or like somewhere in public cloud in SaaS model. So that's what's actually people are looking for more.
I don't know if there is a more or less. I mean, there are people looking for both. So, and again, I'm very familiar with the education market because I did a lot of work, you know, during the pandemic and getting students connected. So yeah, you had some schools that had an IT department or even individual who was skilled enough and motivated enough to deploy it themselves. And you know, they were just looking for a capital expense. They bought the equipment, they chose their own vendors, deployed it themselves, and they're going to manage the network themselves. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have other school districts who just hired a service provider like a Boingo or a GeoVerse and said, I want it all. Just and here's what I want it to do. And then let the service providers go to work in setting up the network and delivering the throughput that they needed. So you got both ends, and no different in the enterprise space. Although given the strength of their teams, I'd say enterprises in general probably favor more, we're going to do it ourselves. But then take someone like an airport who would hire someone like Boingo to just do it as a managed network. Both ends of the spectrum, almost equally, I'd say.
I would say there's a steep learning curve depending on what industry you're in. So, and what size you are, it's really going to vary. Industrials like to have everything on-prem, but if you take a look at what AWS just launched 2 weeks ago now, it's like, I don't know if you get that in 2 days with Prime or not, never mind. But yeah, they're going to send you the entire private deployment capability, get your SIMs, do your SaaS registration, everything. But it does have cloud involved, so that may be a challenge with them with certain customers. But you'll see a wide array of deployments, both on, you know, private sort of air gap networks versus the traditional sort of service provider macro model.
Karen asked a question in the chat. Can you speak more about the FCC auction? Oh, gosh, Karen, can you be more specific? Well, it's gone and passed. So no more PAL licenses available, although there is a secondary market now for PAL licenses where you can actually work with someone who purchased and you can license some of their PAL license. You can get spectrum for a shortened period of time if you only need it for a certain period of time. So there is an aftermarket now for PAL licenses.
I posted a link to the results and the maps of who won and what.
Thank you.
Like, you know, all licenses were not created equal. There were 22,000 some licenses. You have to keep in mind, Verizon spent, I think it was $5.5 billion,
Yes, they did.
something like that. And they only got about, I think, 500 licenses. Dish spent not even $1 billion, I think. It was right around $1 billion maybe, and they got 5,500 licenses. Those are from memory, so I have to check my math on those, but
The relative scale is correct. And yeah, and that's because licenses were based on population density in those areas.
right. Yeah, if you're gonna get a license in LA, you're gonna pay big bucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, the licensing could be a lunch and learn session on its own.
Yeah.
So
There are some great articles out there unpacking the whole PAL auction. Actually, I couldn't even do it justice. But yeah, there are plenty of people who have both written kind of in the pro column that it was a huge success and here's why. And you know, other people who say, well, maybe it wasn't as big of a success and here's why. Having invested many years in this technology, I tend to err on I think it was actually a big success given people's expectations at the time.
we do have another question from Jessica. She was asking, I would like to know if anyone is using this spectrum now.
Yeah. So there are quite a few. And I think, you know, Russ, I think you posted an article in the chat around, you know, I forget, it was up a ways, but around.
So the one about the North Carolina use, that was I think a Comcast trial. But there's tons of people using it. The SaaS vendors are busy.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are. It's quite a bit going on as far as that's concerned. So I know we've got quite a bit going on in the chat. Okay, so
What is that one? If I build 5G?
if I build 5G, do I need to support 4G since it's private?
If you were to build your own, you know, CBRS 5G network, does it need to support 4G? No, it does not. But I think currently all the equipment out in the market would support both, and that has a lot to do with the radio chipsets. You know, since 5G is still relatively new, almost all 5G radio chipsets support both 5G and 4G. Not that you would have to use, you know, it's your network. You wouldn't have to use LTE, but yeah, you'd be paying a premium on the equipment because it would be able to do both.
Yeah, and remote, to Brian's point, that particular part of the technology is called having backward capability to work back and forth and being able to utilize both the 4G and the 5G network.
Yeah, since we're on the subject of 4G, 5G, it's interesting to note that we haven't really yet seen the killer applications on 5G come to fruition. A lot of the early, let's call it experimentation or proof of concepts, leveraging 5G spectrum, were kind of just like bigger, faster, lower latency 4G applications. So we have yet to see that kind of Uber of 5G emerge. I mean, there's a lot being done right now in augmented reality and VR type stuff that really needs like zero latency. Obviously in the medical field, robotics, precision robotics, you know, those things are being, those are kind of, I would say, the no-brainers of the arrival of 5G. But something that's completely new and possible only because 5G now exists in the world. Yeah, I don't know if we've seen that yet. I don't think we have.
Okay, we have time for one last question, and Gregory is a new one. So he has put, I have developed an enhancement to the 5G PHY later
Sweet.
protocol. So what vendors or organizations would be most helpful to contact?
Oh man, I could give you, I could share a line card with you and connect you to most of them. No, yeah, interested. We're very interested in discussing that with you, Gregory. And then, yeah, we have a plethora of vendors and orgs that we could connect you to.
Actually, that's a great segue, because we're only down to like the last couple of minutes here, and I know we have to wrap up. Maddie's kind of, smiling at me, and I know what that means. So thank you so much, Maddie, for being super sweet to us and allowing us this opportunity. So we want to wrap this up and pretty much provide a summary. So in summary, there are several advantages over public LTE and Wi-Fi, and utilizing CapEx investments with private LTE as well as CBRS. Apart from big industries, CBRS can bring LTE to new areas, particularly underserved markets or rural areas. As IoT continues its upward trend, private LTE can be a heavy lifter. And as we mentioned before, it can be upgraded to include 5G once the technology is available. And adopters can expect to save money and enjoy increased reliability over the public network. So for those that want to connect with us, my name again is Michelle Grimes-Harding. I was your host for this Lunch and Learn session, and I couldn't have done it without the best half of the organization in this presentation, my Vice President of Sales, Brian Balowski. Feel free to contact either one of us. We're both on LinkedIn. You can connect with us that way. And you can also connect with us by utilizing our email. So we also invite you to take a look at our company website, which is www.calchipconnect.com. And you can learn more about our organization and overall what it is that we have to offer. So again, I am very honored to have spoken before all of you today and grateful for this opportunity. We wish all of you a wonderful holiday season, a very prosperous, safe, and healthy 2022. And we hope to see you on the
At
other
CES.
side.
We'll see you at CES.
Yes, please visit us. For those who are attending CES, we will be there in grand form and fashion. And you can always set up a personal meeting with Brian or myself, and we can talk more about it. Russ, we definitely want to connect with you, continue our discussions. In fact, we want to connect with every one of you. Karen, please look me up on LinkedIn. I would love to connect with you. And we can have some increased discussions. And, for those who are attending CES, I'd be more than happy to grab a cup of coffee or a latte or a frappuccino or something like that along with you, or a cup of water, for those who don't want to spend any money. I mean, we're good either way. We're very flexible in this space. So Maddie, I'll turn it over to you for closing remarks.
Cool. Thank you so very much, Michelle and Brian. Wonderful presentation. We appreciate your time and all of the energy that you bring to each presentation and to being a Riot sponsor. So I will close this out today. Happy holidays to everyone, and please connect with Michelle and Brian for any follow-up conversations. Thank you all again, and happy Wednesday.
Thanks, Maddie. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great one.